Hello friends, Host Eric here, talking with famous people. I'm going to do a debate place video here on Sam Harris Jordan Peterson debate. I'm going to do my best to cover the argumentation that I hear well. This may need to be an edited video or it may be a long video. I also want to start with a little bit of context from an illocutionary frame, that is to say, like, this is the sort of thing that for some reason, well, I know what the reason is. I've avoided doing this sort of thing for a long time. And as I was about to do it right now, I was musing about my own limitations, my own fear-based failures. It's only maybe within the last year or two that I truly feel safe. And what I mean by that is, prior to that, I'd always assumed that if I went looking for them, I'd find people smarter than me that I couldn't hang with argumentationally. And that I was scared of that. I didn't want to find that. I didn't want that to happen. I didn't want to come across somebody and realize I'm totally outmatched. And I knew I never should have believed in myself. Because there's a powerful impulse to hate myself that I've never quite gotten over. I'm not sure why. I don't know where it's from or what it comes from, but I mean, I'm a pretty happy-go-lucky guy now, but if you're somebody out there who follows all this stuff that I'm saying, all the TI shit, have faith in yourself and don't be scared. I also know that I'm going to feel somewhat jealous watching this video. Jealous of both of these people. So that's another reason why I have avoided doing this kind of stuff. But that's enough preface. I'll start the video and we'll see how it goes. I might have to edit it.
Needlessly horrible, and to mitigate all of that and live in a better and better world.
Okay. Well, so okay. So okay. So that's a lot of points of agreement. So I also believe that there is a catastrophe of arbitrary moral injunction, and that there's a catastrophe of moral relativism, and that has to be dealt with, and that there are genuine differences between the proper way of behaving morally and the improper way of behaving morally. And I think that they are grounded in human universals, even though there's a wide amount of variation. So that's a lot of points of agreement, right? So we know that there's two things we want to avoid. Conceptually speaking, which is the moral relativism and this kind of moral absolutism that's grounded in an arbitrary statement of facts that you identify with religious fundamentalism. I would identify that with fundamentalism more generally, not with religious fundamentalism per se, because I see it also happening in secular states, let's say, like Nazi Germany or so it doesn't seem to be religious fundamentalism per se that's crucial to your argument.
No, it's not. So that just to close the loop on that, the only reason why I would focus on religion in particular there is that religion is the only language game wherein fundamentalism and dogmatism dogmatism is not a pejorative concept. Dogma is a good word, specifically within Catholicism, and the notion that you must believe things on faith, that is, in the absence of compelling evidence that would otherwise cause a rational person to believe it, that in a religious context is considered a feature, not a bug. Elsewhere, we recognize it to be a bug, and that's why the unique focus on religion.
All right. So is it reasonable to assume that we've already established, at least in principle, that there's an association between the totalitarian regimes, let's say,
and dogmatism, yeah.
And the dogmatism that characterizes religious belief.
Yeah.
What do you think, although at least in principle, the secularist totalitarian states and the religious fundamentalist totalitarian states do differ in one important regard, which is that the religious types ground their axioms in God and the secular totalitarian types don't. And so there's got to be something about totalitarianism per se that's independent of, that's associated with religious belief in the manner that you just described, but that's not particularly associated with the belief in God. There's something that makes them, that's a commonality between them. And so do you have any sense of what that might be?
Okay, so this is an interesting question, the question of whether or not the problems that often correlate with religion are specific to religious faith, or if in fact that they share a commonality with the same sort of problems emerging from totalitarianism. And I know already I'm going to be siding with Jordan Peterson on this issue. Sam Harris is making an arbitrary distinction here. The fact that look, we've got many examples of people exercising faith in ways that are harmful, reductive, dismissive of the other, rights violating. And we also have many examples of faith that are not. So I think Jordan Peterson is correct here to say that the commonality is what needs to be addressed and discovered, and not the faith be attacked. Sam Harris likes to attack religion. I know that over the years he's parsed that down narrower and narrower so that he's attacking really fundamentalism. And Jordan Peterson is correct in saying, look, you're not really attacking religion.
Well, I think one has to acknowledge that there's something uniquely pernicious, at least potentially, about religious beliefs, because they have the otherworldly variable, the supernatural variable, you're going to get everything you want after you die, so this life doesn't matter.
Okay, but those things don't make it more pernicious. Those are explanations for bad behavior that you like less, right? So if I murder a bunch of people because I'm trying to make a point about income inequality, or if I murder a bunch of people because I'm trying to get virgins in heaven, that's to say that the ideology is the thing that's pernicious is fundamentally incorrect. The thing that's pernicious, what does pernicious mean, actually? What's the literal definition of that? I'm curious. I could use it in a sentence, but I'm not actually sure exactly what it means. It's just bad, basically, dangerous, at high risk for causing problems, having a harmful effect, especially in a gradual or subtle way. Okay, yeah, that's the connotation I was missing there. Okay, or the denotation, actually. So there's no reason. The distinction he's making is arbitrary. Jordan Peterson asked him to establish what the distinction was, and he just said, well, I think you have to admit that this arbitrary distinction isn't arbitrary. Well, no, you don't have to admit that, Sam Harris.
Issue that that allows for a kind of misbehavior that is especially
Okay, so it seems that the claim would be that if you put forward axiomatically your claim that God exists, then you can use that claim to justify whatever arbitrary atrocities your system might throw off.
Yeah, I guess the only point I was making there is that not all dogmas are created equal. Some dogmas are, on their face, more dangerous and more divisive.
Right, but what I'm curious about specifically is, because it seems to me that the dogmas of the USSR and the dogmas of Nazi Germany were as pernicious as any religious dogmas, and they may also share important featers with pernicious religious dogmas, but it isn't clear to me from your perspective what those commonalities would be.
Well, so, I mean, in some ways you're recapitulating an argument I've made, and this is an argument that I would make against you were you to claim, as you have elsewhere, that atheism is responsible for the greatest atrocities of the 20th century. The idea that Stalinism and Nazism and fascism were expressions of atheism simply doesn't make any sense. I mean, in the case of fascism and Nazism, it doesn't make any sense because the fascists and the Nazis, by and large, were not even atheists. I mean, Hitler wasn't an atheist, and he was talking about executing a divine plan, and he got lots of support from the churches, and the Vatican did nothing to stop him, and fascism, as you know, coexisted quite happily with Catholicism in Croatia and Portugal and Spain and Italy. So, but even in the case of...
I agree with Sam Harris there that atheism is not the cause of problems in communist regimes were technically atheists like the USSR or China. The point is, in both of those instances, when you're talking about religion or other kinds of ideology, the thing that makes them pernicious is the fact that they afford themselves primacy, and that part of that primacy is the prohibition of discourse. As long as you have free speech, as long as everybody can say what they want, then you have a system that has active white blood cells against ideology, because everybody has to defend what they're doing with words. But if you don't have a system that enables people to complain at will, then you've fell victim to one or more forms of authoritarianism in which people are using force and violence to prevent discourse because they've afforded a certain ideological frame primacy. So much so primacy have they afforded it that they justify transgression. So that's the bottom line, is these bad things happen when people don't get to speak their minds.
Of Stalin, what was so wrong with that situation were all of the ways in which it so resembled a religion. You had a personality cult, you had dogmatism that held sway to a point where apostasy and blasphemy were killing offenses. You know, the people who didn't toe the line were eradicated, and so to take a more modern example, North Korea is a religious cult. It just doesn't happen to be a one that is focused on the next life or supernatural claims.
Come on now. The distinction between religion and totalitarianism is much more clear than that. The difference is religion, properly understood, is about individuals managing their own relationship with a teleological frame. Human beings can only understand things through some manner of purpose frame. In other words, there's nothing in anyone's reality that doesn't link to purpose. If you if it doesn't have purpose, then if you pay attention to it, you afford it purpose, unavoidably. It's now has some purpose. It's like, think of any action you want, or any moment in the day you want, or any piece of knowledge you want to think of, and you will discover that it links back to purpose in some way. Somebody else's purpose, your purpose. There's no way to understand anything except as an expression of relation to an agent. We can talk about a rock in an abstract sense, but remember that the frame can move up and down. So I might talk about a rock and say it's a purposeless rock. It's just sitting someplace. But what I'm actually doing is I'm making the word rock an object of analysis, and I'm doing so for a purpose, to express to you this idea of how everything has a purpose. And if I would actually look at a rock and pick it up, there'd be a reason for doing so. If I were to look at a rock and have no purpose for it at all, or experience no purpose linked to it, I wouldn't notice it. It wouldn't make it into my attention. So attention and purpose in that regard are intimately linked. I wouldn't say they're synonymous, but to attend necessarily involves some application of purpose. Now, as a consequence, it's when you're talking about religion, you're talking about two different things. You're talking about faith and or personal engagement with supernatural stuff, right? And then you're talking about organized groups that function like a government of sorts, or a community, well, a source of power. The latter thing is, anytime you have groups that have power, those groups that have power are subject to abusing that power. And if those groups have some sort of power over the law, then you're talking about a situation where that group needs to be especially held accountable. Religion and law don't mix, because there's no accountability for religious leaders. The interpretations of various religious texts are equally defensible in various ways that regular arguments are not. If I argue that we should do this because of secular reasons, you can respond with secular reasons, and we can determine the correct answer. If I tell you that we should do this because the Bible says meality, meality, mea, then you can respond with the Bible also says meality, meality, mea, and I can say, well, we should interpret this like this, and we should interpret this like this. In other words, we're looking to it's like we're looking to a book on economics for an answer to a history problem. This book is not designed to provide us answers to specific problems or answers to specific questions. Whatever you think about your various religious texts, they are not constitutions with instructions for how to do things. They are parables and a bunch of other shit. It may contain instructions in them, but those instructions can't possibly be followed, because if you're looking at the book as a whole, you've got instructions and non-instructions, and the words are open to random interpretation, and nobody can agree on them, and there's no link back to the real world that allows you to sort of say, okay, well, these facts are determinate, because it's all textual, and the subject of it is not argumentation that's logical. It makes its affirmation on the grounds that because there is an ineffable divine, and this book talks about that it has argumentational primacy, but it can't possibly because it's not making arguments. So anyway, the point is those communities that build up around the books that we call religious communities, they take on the character of the community, not the book. So when people say Islam's bad and they start talking about the Quran saying this and that and the other thing, it doesn't matter what the Quran says. Islam is bad because all of its communities express a pre-Enlightenment frame of thinking in their governance. It doesn't matter how crazy your religion is. If you don't have any power over anybody, then you won't use it to oppress them. And it doesn't matter how crazy your political ideology is. If you don't have any power over anybody, you won't use it to oppress them. What prevents people with crazy ideologies from gaining power is transparency and open discourse and a vigorous and active marketplace of ideas. So what prevents totalitarianism is that debate that they're having. What prevents religious totalitarianism is that debate that they're having. Sam Harris is wrong about faith. Faith is an incredibly powerful behavior that one can choose to engage in for personal gain, development, growth, insight, whatever. You have to have faith. You cannot get through life without having faith. The thing about faith is it doesn't have to be in God, but we use purpose, as I was saying, to understand everything. And the one thing that we don't have a clear answer on is ourselves. So I know what the purpose of this lighter is, but I don't know what the purpose of me is. And the reason I know what the purpose of the lighter is because it's something that I'm using. So in other words, an agent, me, has a purpose for it. I use it to light things on fire. And I also know that it has a maker. Somebody made this thing. Now, not everything in life has a maker. A rock doesn't seem to have a maker. Nobody made that rock. But a stick does. It's a tree. The tree made the stick. What made the tree? Well, what made the rock? We don't need to know what made the tree and what made the rock, really. But and I don't really need to know what the rock's purpose is, if it has one. But it's kind of important for me to know what my purpose is. Now, note, and it's important, knowing what my purpose is, or knowing better what my purpose is, does not mean I get to know better what your purpose is. And that's the problem that Sam Harris has with religion, is there's this tendency amongst religious people who experience the benefits of faith, and they are myriad, let me tell you, to insist that it must be the right thing for other people as well. But I'm not telling you that it's the right thing for you necessarily. When I say it has myriad benefits, I should qualify that with, for me. It had myriad benefits for me. I think it depends probably on what your relationship to various abstract anchor points is. Like, I was born and raised an atheist by atheist parents who talk shit about Christians. My dad especially would read the newspaper and he'd see that somebody was trying to put a cross up at the city hall or something, and he'd freak out. And as a consequence, I never had any bad experiences with religion. I didn't have any bad experiences with atheism either, because atheism isn't an ideology. It is not like religion. It is not like political ideology or something like that. It's certainly not responsible for any deaths in anywhere. It's just the negation of choosing an answer to a teleological question that has a moral component. So to say that we are moral agents is to say that we have obligations, duties that exceed our own interest. And to know exactly what those moral obligations and duties are, we can determine the negative moral obligations and duties simply with logic. That if we want to be able to answer question A with answer B, then we have to accept the following moral prohibitions. And those are basically prohibitions against transgression. But what we can't know anything about from logic is what our positive moral obligations are, or what is moral in a positive sense, to the extent that altruism is moral, and or what good works we can or should do, what constitutes a good work. That is not possible to know by argumentation alone. You cannot argue a definitive answer that this sort of action is good or that sort of action is good. You can get a definitive answer with this sort of action is bad or that sort of action is bad. And the reason you can't get a definitive answer as to why something's good or which is good is because that requires you to know what your purpose is. And it's individuated. Is this a good thing that I'm doing? Am I doing good works right now? Well, I think so. I hope so. Is this in line with my purpose? I think so. I hope so. And what do I mean by that? Well, I was a drunk for a long time, and I quit drinking when I was 42. I've been sober. Let me pull a bonger if I talk to you guys about this. I've been sober now for 5 years, thanks to Alcoholics Anonymous. I haven't been to Alcoholics Anonymous in more than 4 years, but they get all the credit. And they get all the credit to the extent that people get credit. But a big part of that is faith. When I went into Alcoholics Anonymous as a I couldn't drink anymore. I was just such a drunk, every day, every night I get like blackout drunk by the end, By the very end of it, I was even drinking like before work and stuff, which I had never done before. But I'd have like little empties of airplane bottles of Smirnoff 100 littering my car and stuff. I never got pulled over, never got a DUI, never lost my job, never got, I stayed out of trouble somehow. I don't know. Anyway, but what I didn't stay out of was self-loathing, and I absolutely hated myself beyond all measure. And so when I went in there, it was the first time I said, going into the AA, that I'm not going to think Eric's thoughts. I'm not going to think about how that doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. Okay, they're wrong about this, though. I'm going to just try to get instructions from them about what to do. I'm just going to follow. I'm just going to try to obey. My words are going to be, I understand and will comply, and to humble myself. So I followed their instructions and stuff for a while. I got a sponsor. When he told me to pray, I prayed. He didn't tell me to believe. He didn't tell me to become a Christian. He didn't tell me to become a deist or anything like that. He said, pray. So I did. And I still do. Pretty much every night. makes me emotional. Anyway, I didn't know I was gonna get this is gonna go. This is not a debate police video. I don't know what the fuck this is. I'll probably title it debate police anyway. So I think that the behavior of prayer, which is not predicated on belief, by the way, and this is the most important thing that probably both these guys don't get, is you do not have to believe anything. You don't have to affirm anything. Because what does it mean to believe something anyway? What I'm saying is, I get to affirm and negate whatever I want. So I might affirm atheism or negate God. I would say that you're going to have a really hard time winning an argument as to God's existence or God wants this or God wants that, because that's not the purpose of faith. Faith doesn't afford you arguments. Faith affords you power, personal power. It affords you the power that comes with humility and the unburdening of the self from certain jobs that are impossible. I can't figure out what the moral thing to do is. It's not possible to make argumentation won't ever get me there. I know for sure of this. There is no way to successfully affirm a given set of protocols as the correct positive moral actions. You just can't do it. No matter how much you argue it, it won't win. I mean, it won't win against myself. Like, I can beat those arguments. It's bullshit. Those positive moral obligations are bullshit. I mean, unless they're contractual, in which case it's a moral obligation because you chose to make it one. And even then, contract is limited in its capacity to maintain control over somebody's moral status, so to speak. Anyhow, so yeah, faith is important for me. And most importantly, faith is not an affirmation. It does not require belief before or after that you carry away. Okay? Faith is something you practice, and it enables you to utilize a section of metaphysical framework called magical thinking. For intellectuals like me, or a lot of people watch this channel probably, who are, NTPs or just hardcore rationalists, probably a lot of my audience are rationalists and NTPs. Not all of them, but a lot of it. They don't want to be subject to indefensible claims. Don't make any. You don't have to make any claims about God. You don't have to become a advocate of God or faith to benefit from it. And you don't have to defend it when arguing. It's a much more interesting position to say, I'm an atheist who prays every day, or I'm a Christian atheist. Trips people out. They're like, what? Yeah, I pray every day to God because I have a lot of faith in God, but I'm an atheist. What do you mean? Well, I affirm atheism. Okay, God. But you just said, oh, well, we're just chatting. I'm not making an advocacy here. People scratch their heads. What? See, I love what this is. ENTP's very favorite thing is to find shit like that, right? That allows you to have a position that is logically defensible that no one's ever heard before, and they don't have any idea what to do with, right? It's also resolving, right? In this instance, it resolves the conflict between those two, because it explains that it's a behavior, not an advocacy. And that when people treat it as an advocacy, then they're trying to impose some sort of discursive primacy for their set of arguments. If that additionally has within it some claim that other conflictory discourse should be prohibited, well, that's where you get authoritarianism. And you want to prevent any of those kind of ideologies that claim primacy, so much so that they would justify transgression. You want to prevent any of those from getting power. But the best way to prevent them from getting power is a active marketplace of ideas and abundant discourse of the sort that we're doing right now. So I'm going to end this video. These guys are a couple of smart guys, but I mean, the explanation I just gave is the best arguments regarding this matter. So, as far as I'm concerned, these questions are all resolved. But you may disagree, and you probably think that sounds incredibly arrogant and whatever. I don't know. I don't have great FE like Sam Harris, and I don't have, Jordan Peterson's FE is a one-trick pony. You call him earnest intensity. That's his one FE trick. Anyway, I do have a lot of respect for both those guys. They're both really smart guys, and yeah, I'm sure they have a debate in which they respond to each other, which is to say, they're actual people. They're serious people. They're not just like no bullshit, right? That guy no bullshit. He doesn't count as a person in some regard. It's in the discursive realm, right? He's just a pothole in the road. He's unwilling to engage meaningfully about ideas at all. And these two people are very willing to engage meaningfully about ideas. And that means, what does it mean to engage meaningfully? It means to be responsive. That non-responsive bullshit where, Jesus Christ, it pisses me off more than anything. I think, more than anything, it pisses me off. Anyway, thank you, sweet baby Jesus, for that bong rip. Went straight to the dome. Straight to the holy dome. Sitting down the Virgin Mary. I want to come all over her face. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to plant cheese. Dogs and dogettes.